So domestically, we're working very closely with our partners there, and many of you will have experienced the success of JobFest, where we're regularly bringing together thousands of young people and securing hundreds of jobs for them through those one-day events. We've just recently launched a Build Auckland campaign, which is to get young people into the construction industry, and you'll see the results of that over the next wee while. Even things as simple as assisting young people with attitude and with driver licence training are important prerequisites for them getting employment. We've worked with MSD on the establishment of the ARA Skills Hub at the airport, and we've just recently opened, in fact we're opening it formally next week in terms of opening the doors, a skills hub at Wynyard Quarter to make it easier for young people to secure jobs. But as part of that, there are two other important aspects of talent attraction. One is migration, and when we have previously discussed the economic development strategy, we currently do not produce enough skilled workers in Auckland to enable us to hit those targets in the EDS. So the ability to attract migrants is an important part of how we attract talent, and I'll come on to that, the implications of that in a minute. And secondly, international education. It's a very large industry for us in Auckland, and we're working increasingly to look at how do we convert as many of those international students into long-term workers for the city. About 12 months ago, for those councillors who were then in office, you'll recall we had a workshop where we talked about our funding models, and we welcome the Mayor's initiative around a visitor levy to provide a new funding stream for ATED. We also talked about partnerships with business, and already a significant amount of our activity is co-funded with business, and that's been an underlying principle for ATED since it began, that we're always looking to leverage a ratepayer dollar to get either a dollar from central government and or a dollar from the private sector. We're increasingly using user pays models for many of the areas where we're assisting industry, including Screen, and there's always the opportunity for further partnerships with central government, and as we've seen with the Investment Attraction Task Force, we have a much closer working relationship with central government agencies and a much better definition of our respective roles than we've ever had before. And we look forward to working with Council on a long-term investment approach around many of our activities, and an agreement on the anticipated returns with Council, both direct and indirect, short-term and long-term. So, just finishing, as we look at the Auckland economy and we look at our prospects, we see a number of growth issues, and none of these will be new to you because these are obviously predominant in everyone's mind. Capital continues to be somewhat of a constraint for our companies, particularly for early stage companies as they look to expand. So a significant focus of the Investment Attraction Task Force in our work is this establishment of new funds that are particularly targeted on expansion capital. That's the capital that takes a company from a startup into a fully functioning and operating company, ideally with an international focus. We have spatial challenges in terms of our determining where we want to drive job growth, and it's been very pleasing over the last 12 months the work that we've been able to do with Panuku Development Auckland, particularly around Manukau and Onehunga, where we're not just looking at housing and commercial property, we're actually looking at where are the jobs going to come from. How do we create high value jobs in those communities so that we get the best possible outcome for Aucklanders. I've touched on talent and that opportunity there. I've previously presented to this and other, to council committees and other forums about education. I still don't believe we're doing enough as a city to influence what is being taught in our schools. There are still far too many schools that are not teaching the subjects that are going to get our young people the high value jobs that we need. It's a reality that in our education system it is decentralised, it is community managed, and while the Ministry of Education sets some high level guidelines, it's down to individual schools as to what they teach in their curriculum, particularly around specialist subjects. So I believe it is an area that we need to focus on more, and I think it's an area that we can be working much more closely with local boards on. So that's an area that I'd like to discuss more in the future. Housing and transport are obviously the largest issues and predominant in the industry. The Mayor spoke at our tourism update yesterday, and his points were well made. Without more housing, we can't attract talent into the city, we can't attract workers into the city, and it's placing considerable constraints on our ability to continue to grow as an economy. Transport unlocks a lot of the value for an economy, both in terms of moving goods and moving people. And lastly, global positioning. We need to continue to tell the story that Auckland is a global city, that we have an aspiration to be an innovation hub of the Asia Pacific, and that this is a world-class environment for people to live and work so that they can contribute to our economy. I look forward to questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brett. And sorry to have tried to condense all this down. It just feels that as we lay out the work of this next 3 years, it's critical to understand the context. So, a few questions. Councillor Casey and Councillor Lee.
I don't mind who answers. Can you talk a little bit about the place desired by many as the brand stroke logo stroke story that was on the front page of the Herald?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor. We have undertaken an extensive research exercise where we consulted about 55,000 Aucklanders to look at what is the story of Auckland. And hopefully you will have all received that pack, and you'll be visited by the team that's working on that to take you through the results. Through that work, it was established that the reason that Auckland was called Tamaki Makaurau, the place desired by many, 700 odd years ago when it was first settled, is still relevant today. And many of the factors that are the same. So we're now looking to go back to the people but it's not a slogan, it's not a recommended tagline for Auckland, it's a theme amongst many other themes, and you'll see those when you see the material. So our plan has always been, now that we have aggregated that information together, to go back to the people that were interviewed for that report, and the people that provided their feedback through other mechanisms, including the Love Auckland campaign.
I think just hang on a sec, Brett, sorry, I'm just aware we could go down quite a vortex of now a million questions on this. We are going to be workshopping this issue, that's my understanding. So I think I'd like to park the global branding exercise and for us to work on that at a workshop when we've got much more time to talk.
Thank you. So we'll also have a lot more feedback then.
Indeed. I think that would be a lot more useful. So next I've got Member Blair.
No, I didn't know.
No? Okay. And Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just interested in your your idea around education and what we're teaching in our schools. When I was with the local board, we were interested particularly in civics education, but I know that there's a real drive for more science, engineering type technology subjects. Is that where you're going with those statements?
Yeah, there's an interesting dichotomy, I think, in this area. There's definitely the need for more specialist subjects, but also the feedback we get from employers, and we've now got 58 of them in the Youth Employment Pledge, is that those soft skills are not being taught either. So we need to get that balance right. There's a curriculum element, which is, are we teaching the subjects that you absolutely probably need to have to get a job? But secondly, are we equipping young people with those soft skills to get jobs? And I think we had a very good meeting with MSD last week, and there's definitely a desire by them to get out into the schools and to be talking to them about what we need. And my personal view, some of you know I'm involved with the Manaiakalani Education Trust in Point England, Glennis, Panmure. There's nothing like getting in front of young people as early as possible and really giving them a sense of what direction the city is taking, what direction the economy is taking, so they can set their aspirations. And I think it is, I think we do need a different approach. Social media, we can use some of those techniques, but I do believe it's about getting face to face. And I think having a joined up approach where we have the central government agencies, the council agencies and the local boards engaged gives us a really powerful combination.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Collins. A couple more speakers. Councillor Denise Lee, Councillor Philippina, Member Wilcox, and then I think we'll move on to RFA. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks for the presentation and for your time this morning. Nothing beats actually fronting up in person and seeing what the issues are when you talk to people. So I've thoroughly enjoyed attending Jobs Fest and a Build AKL employment day, I guess, where young people turned up and were applying for jobs, talking to employers, getting drug tested right then and there for eligibility. It was, yeah, how did I go, Richard Hills? Just asked me. Yeah, it was quite incredible to see it on the ground and to talk to young people and understand from there. So your comments around education, thanks Councillor Simpson, are bang on. When I've talked to some of these kids about why they're there, it's often about their school journey, either failing them or helping them to be there. So there's quite a bit of randomness. So I wonder, and you outlined in your slides about your investment attraction task force. Perhaps another task force of a education pathway kind. I mean, possibly even putting MOE into that task force and backing the bus up a lot earlier. I had a question, taking advantage of Dave being here from a governance perspective, Dave. So looking at your own words that you had in an earlier slide about getting the place right, showcasing our advantage, conversion, and then finally future-proofing. From a governance perspective, and I asked this question at a CCO monitoring committee in the last term, what sort of thematic discussions are you having as a board? I know that you've had to be reactionary in the last wee while, but what about the proactive stuff, Dave? What one or two thoughts can you give us for what's occupying your time because you're seeing the gravity or the positivity of it?
Probably the two areas, well, the first thing I'd say is that if I go back 6 years when we came in to the role as ATEED, I was clear about the visitor economy bit. The rest of the bit was a kind of a fog, to be perfectly honest, trying to understand exactly what you do with, when you think about the size of the economy and what you've got to do with really very scarce resources, to be honest. I'm not advocating that we have any more resources, but the scarce when you've got to work out how you actually make a difference. So it comes back to what I always call it the 90-10 rule, or the 80-20 rule. What can you do with a bit to make the biggest difference in the economy? And trying to drive through and get absolute clarity about what we're doing and what we say no to actually is the hardest thing. Because there is so many things you can do, but it's having the science and rationale by what you say no to, and know that your scarce resources are actually leveraged in the best way possible. So having the framework very clear took 4 years. Now we've had the framework. The last two strategy sessions we have at a board is really interesting. That framework has not been relitigated. It's interesting how it actually makes sense from the intellect around that board table, even with new board members like the brains of a Stuart McCutcheon coming on. Gets it, really understands it. So that's been a big step. It's the question, though, is what I'd say, is now learning abroad, the work that Patrick's done coming out of Brookings Institute and these things, trying to work out what the best practice internationally is to be able to leverage what we do. And that is a constant learning. It's trying to adopt it. I know, the work that was done around the Auckland story, that's a different thing, but really trying to shape and be very clear about why and how we are doing things with best practice internationally being leveraged. And that's what we've been driving from the board standpoint.
So, Councillor, we're now running, I don't want to keep RFA waiting, and we do have a huge amount to get through. I know there's a million questions about this. I'm going to suggest that we pick some of these up on an ongoing basis. I know the Mayor has sent around an email asking for advice and thoughts on youth connections, Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, those kind of issues. I'd like us to deal with the education task force and the direction when we scope that out with the mayor. So I'll move on to Councillor Filipaina and Councillor Wilcox. So brief questions, and then we are going to have to move on.